Welcome back to another episode of the Mormon News Roundup. I am your host, D-Days, and that's Talon on loan from Kolob. Today we're going to dive into one of the most fascinating and challenging aspects of the Book of Mormon, the construction of Nephi's transoceanic vessel. Is it really possible for a family stranded in the desert in 600 BC to build an ocean-crossing vessel from scratch? You're about to find out.
Welcome to the Mormon News Roundup, your go-to source for the latest headlines and critical analysis on all things LDS.
Breaking news!
Join D-Days.
Mormon News Roundup.
That's talent on loan from Kolob. Every Sunday and Monday night.
We will uncover the truth behind the news that matters most to the Mormon community.
By way of background, in the Book of Mormon, Lehi is a prophet who leads his family out of Jerusalem at around 600 BC to escape impending destruction, guided by divine revelation. His son Nephi is known for his faith and determination. He plays a pivotal role in securing sacred records and obtaining vital supplies for their journey. Together, Lehi and Nephi face numerous trials and challenges across the desert, ultimately building a ship under divine instruction to continue their voyage to the Promised Land. Of course, before we begin building a ship, we've got to mine ore and make tools. It would be a monumental task in and of itself, but it would be an even greater challenge for a family that has been stranded in the desert for nearly a decade to create a ship out of whatever resources are in the desert. Let's take a look at 1 Nephi chapter 17, where Nephi finds ore, makes a bellows, and then mines the ore.
Thou shalt construct a ship, after the manner which I shall show thee, that I may carry thy people across these waters. And I said, Lord, whither shall I go that I may find ore to molten, that I may make tools to construct the ship after the manner which thou hast shown unto me? And it came to pass that the Lord told me whither I should go to find ore, that I might make tools.
So how difficult would it be to make bellows without tools from scratch in the desert? Constructing bellows without some basic tools would be a formidable challenge, especially given the precision and complexity involved in their design. While it's theoretically possible to attempt to create rudimentary bellows, the lack of advanced tools would make the process labor-intensive and the resulting bellows less efficient. Here's what you'd need just to make the bellows. Building a sturdy frame for the bellows would likely involve shaping wood, which itself would require tools like saws or axes. Creating an airtight chamber from leather or other flexible materials would involve cutting and shaping, which again would be more efficiently done with tools. Designing and implementing a valve system to control airflow would require some precision in crafting the components, which is challenging without appropriate tools. Ensuring airtight seals between the different components, which again involves cutting and shaping materials. If the small Bedouin family did not have access to the appropriate tools, even constructing rudimentary bellows becomes an insurmountable task. Bellows would typically be considered an advanced tool themselves, and making them without the aid of other tools adds a layer of complexity to the challenge. But the Nephite record says that he made a bellows, so let's see what Nephi did next.
I did make tools of the ore which I did molten out of the rock.
So Nephi moltens it, huh? Molten in English means to melt iron. So he would need a blast furnace to melt the iron out of the rock. In my research, depending on the type of iron we're talking about, you have to get the furnace up to over 2,000 degrees before you can get the materials to soften. And you really have to get it up to about 3,000 degrees before you can get the iron to go molten. The problem here is that that's hotter than a bellows can make it. And looks like these are processes that would not be discovered for another 1,500 years. So the counter argument is that God showed him how to do it. Building a blast furnace, especially in a context with limited tools and resources like 600 BC, would be a complex and challenging endeavor. Blast furnaces are sophisticated structures designed for high-temperature metal smelting. Here's the steps that would be needed to try to make this attempt. Constructing a sturdy foundation for the blast furnace using materials like stone or clay to withstand the high temperatures. Building the furnace stack itself, which typically involves stacking refractory bricks or stones in a specific shape to create a tall and narrow structure. Creating a system to deliver air to the furnace at high pressure. This usually involves a set of bellows or other mechanisms to blow air into the furnace. Implementing tehillas, which are nozzles through which the air is blown into the furnace. These need to be positioned strategically to maximize combustion efficiency. Developing a system for charging the raw materials into the furnace. This involves a carefully designed loading mechanism to maintain the furnace's operation. Securing a suitable fuel source to maintain the high temperatures required for smelting. Charcoal or other carbon-rich materials are commonly used in blast furnaces. Creating a cooling system to prevent the furnace from overheating. This often involves water-cooled channels or pipes. Building a blast furnace requires a combination of knowledge in metallurgy, material science, and engineering, as well as access to suitable raw materials. In practical terms, constructing a blast furnace from scratch in 600 BC in a remote area of Arabia would be a highly ambitious and complex task, and the family would need to rely on ingenuity, experimentation, and adaptation to overcome the numerous challenges involved. Of course, the next challenge is that this furnace needs fuel. Nephi needs charcoal to get the oven above 1,000 degrees because, even if you're burning really hot wood, you can still only get that up to about 1,000 degrees, and that's just not hot enough. Humans weren't able to achieve those 3,000 degree furnaces until we started burning coal. And I hear what you're saying, maybe Nephi could have used charcoal, but charcoal requires burning the wood in charcoal ovens. Charcoal is not just discovered, and in the kind of quantities that they would have to have it, we're not even there yet. They would have to deforest acres and acres of forest to get enough charcoal. And don't forget that we haven't even gotten the iron out of the rocks of the mountain yet. Now, we need to rewind just a little bit. Earlier, the Lord showed Nephi where the ore was. And very importantly, how would Nephi be able to mine the ore without tools? Mining ore without tools would be an exceedingly challenging task. Extracting iron from a seam in a mountain involves several steps, including breaking the ore from the rock, transporting it, and then smelting it to be able to make the usable iron. Without appropriate tools, the family's ability to accomplish these tasks would be severely limited. Here's a simplified overview of the process. They would need tools like picks or hammers to extract the iron from the rock. The absence of such tools would make this step extremely difficult. Moving large quantities of ore, especially if the seam is not located near their working site, would require tools for excavation and transportation, which they would not have. Converting the raw iron ore into usable iron involves smelting, a process that requires high heat and specialized tools, such as furnaces and bellows. Achieving the temperature needed without proper tools would be a significant challenge. In the absence of tools, the family would struggle to extract, transport, and process iron ore effectively. The entire process of obtaining iron from the mountain seam would be a labor-intensive, slow, and likely impractical process without appropriate tools. Naturally, building tools to mine iron ore from scratch would be an ambitious task. The process of constructing tools involves obtaining raw materials, shaping them, and creating functional implements. Here's what they'd need to do just to make the tools. They would need suitable raw materials, likely stones or other hard materials, to create the tool heads. Using abrasive methods, they could attempt to shape these raw materials into basic tool heads. However, achieving the precision needed for effective mining tools without more advanced tools would be challenging. Crafting handles for the tools would require finding or creating suitable wood, bone, or other materials and shaping them appropriately. They would need to combine the tool heads with the handles to create the actual functional tools. Depending on the material available, they might attempt to harden the tool heads through heat treatment, although this process might also be challenging without access to controlled temperatures. Testing the tools in the mining process and refining them through trial and error is a must. While it's theoretically possible to attempt to create rudimentary mining tools from scratch, the lack of advanced tools would make the process labor-intensive and the tools less efficient. Obtaining iron ore in this manner would be a considerable undertaking, and success would depend on the family's resourcefulness, adaptability, and perseverance. Now, it's possible that they smelted gold or silver in making tools instead of iron, and therefore you wouldn't need as much heat. If so, they would have smelted the ore instead of molted it. But for the sake of argument, let's assume that Nephi became an incredible blacksmith overnight, and that somehow now they've got the tools, the furnace, the hammers, the saws, the nails, and everything else they need. It's now time to get the wood for the boat, which the Book of Mormon refers to as works of timbers of curious workmanship. Well, they need a boat that's seaworthy, the one that won't get bashed to smithereens. It needs a keel so it doesn't fall over. Many cultures had experts making just keels, and it is maybe the most important foundation of the boat. And of course, the ship needs to be watertight wood and bound strong to handle a long voyage being pounded by the ocean. Now, they can't just have wood tied together with leather or something like that. They need a boat that can hold up. It would likely need thousands of nails and iron rivets and strong, long straps. Remember, they need to make the nails one by one. There's just simply no way to mass produce them. And it has to be strong enough to hold the entire weight and body of the ship and to withstand the buffetings of the waves and the storms and all the cargo cargo in it. All the stuff inside, humans, livestock, supplies, food, and all of those have to be waterproof at the same time. And let's not forget that there has to be enough wood left over because we likely burned much of the forest down to get the charcoal to burn the furnaces to make the tools and the nails. Based on 21st century reconstruction efforts, scholars estimate that building a 30-meter longship would take approximately 27,000 hours to complete. Investing so much time and resources in this effort suggests that Viking ships were of essential importance to the medieval Norse. A group of enthusiastic archaeologists got together in Denmark and decided to do a recreation of a Viking longship based on what they've excavated. And they figured from the work that they did that it was a 30-meter long ship that took about 40,000 hours of total work to construct. Now that includes the iron, the ropes, the sail, but it doesn't include any of the transportation it took to get those materials to where you are building it. One other note is that these people in Denmark also didn't have to cut down the trees and create everything from scratch. Nephi's family would have to cut the timber, finish it, and steam it to shape the wood for the boat. Wood just simply can't be in a 90-degree angle because it won't be watertight. So you have to have the right kind of wood and be able to steam it in order to curve it perfectly. So just steaming and bending the keel alone, that task, because it has to happen so quickly before the timber cools down again, you have to have a short working time. It would take 40 or 50 men to bend that because it takes enormous strength and they had to work very, very quickly. And let's not forget, they would also have to make specific tools to bend the wood. Naturally, they would need the right kind of wood that can be bent. Bendable wood is also semi-porous. So because the wood can't leak in a transoceanic vessel, we need resins and pitches and stuff that we could coat those with. Hard wood that can hold out water isn't pliable enough to make the boat shape that we need. Vikings used caulking made from animal hair, such as sheep's wool, that had been dipped in a sticky pitch made from pine resin. So add that to the list as well. So if you assume that you're working 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, so you're doing absolutely nothing else, you're not hunting, you're not doing anything else, it's going to take 10 people about a year to construct the ship. Now, what kind of ship are we talking about here? Well, let's read from the Book of Mormon record itself, which claims that the boat was a sailboat.
And it came to pass, I, Nephi, did guide the ship that we sailed again towards the promised land.
And don't forget that Nephi at one point in time was bound to a mast. So a mast means that there's a sail. To power it across the ocean, it needs big sheets of very sturdy material. Viking ships' sails were usually between 50 square meters to 100 square meters. For a transoceanic vessel, you need one that's larger, say 100 square meters for a sail. To be practical, they would likely need more than one sail just in case something happened to it, but just for the sake of this video, we'll focus on just one sail. And the problem is that with only one sail, you'll also need to think of repairing it and patching it during the voyage. Again, going back to the Vikings, they wove together fleece from sheep for their sails. Every square meter required at least 2 fleeces from a sheep. So for what Nephi needs, you're talking about 200 sheep just to produce one sail. And that's just to weave the sail and ignoring any thread that you'll need to sew it. You're also going to need to bring extra patches just in case it gets damaged. You'll likely need an extra sail just in case something catastrophic happens. Now, you can only shear a sheep once a year, so you would need a lot of sheep, like hundreds of them, and the shearers to shear them. Did Bountiful provide feral sheep? Did they take hundreds of sheep with them from Jerusalem? You have to feed the sheep, you have to water them, you have to tend to their young, you have to keep them fenced in, you have to take care of them and take them out to pasture. The point here is that you need lots of resources to not only shear the sheep and make the sails, but to just also keep the sheep alive. And you have to do it in a timely manner, otherwise it will take years to make the sails. With Vikings, ropes were often plaited, but a lot of them were plied and twisted, which takes an enormous amount of time and lots of people. Or they would plait them out of walrus hide. In the Levant area, people usually used hemp. But the problem with wool rope is that it gets wet and it stretches. For sailing, you need materials that can be wet and still hold their tensile strength. With sailing, it takes specialized tools to create rope for sailing, and 3 strong men or strong women probably to make the rope. They build strand by strand. They take wool, string, yarn, and you just keep binding it together. It's not impossible, but it needs resources, and it's a long, cumbersome process. And boats need a lot of rope in order to sail. According to the Nephi record, Bountiful has iron ore, miles of forests of seafaring-grade timber, plenty of pasture land for feral sheep, water, and possibly hemp for rope. Most places would pull resources from surrounding areas, but no location I know of had all of these resources in one place. Resources would be shipped to the area to make the ship. So were there also shipping and transportation networks that Nephi could pull resources from other areas into Bountiful, or did Bountiful really have everything? Making sure you have food and water on the long voyage is a huge task. You need food and water for the people and livestock taken with you, and you need to bring enough food and seeds to start a new civilization in America. We can read in 1 Nephi chapter 18 verse 24.
And it came to pass that we did begin to till the earth, and we began to plant seeds. Yea, we did put all our seeds into the earth which we had brought from Jerusalem.
The Phoenicians, Greeks, and Vikings would stay close to the shore so they could get off, grab fresh water, and get back onto the boat. And let's not forget that seeds spoil usually within a couple of years, especially if not stored well. So somehow they managed to keep them fresh and viable through the 8 years in the desert and while crossing an ocean with salt water. You would need to be able to store a lot of water, and water is heavy, so the boat needs to be sizable enough to take all that water. You need specific fresh foods to ward off scurvy. Most of this food would spoil long before the journey would end. So yes, they came from a land of milk and honey where they could have grown and harvested all this food. But for this journey to be successful, they would also have to create a whole pickles and food preservation industry to prepare for the long voyage. And of course, you can't just put food and water directly onto a boat. You need something to contain them and to help protect the contents from spoiling. Clay jars would be too fragile. Tanned animal skins could work, but once they get wet with those skins, they could start to spoil. And tanning skin is a multi-year process. So I guess we can assume that barrels are the only remaining good option. The problem here is that the first barrels that I'm aware of were made at around 300 BC by the Celts. Going back to the ship, they would also need to have wood to be able to make the barrels and metal for the straps and the bindings. So how long did it take Lehi's family to build a ship and to cross the ocean? Lehi's family left Jerusalem on the year 600 BC and landed in the New World between 591 and 589 BCE. Most scholars of the Book of Mormon assume it took 1 to 3 years to build a boat and cross the ocean. The fundamental conclusion here is that building such a ship from scratch in this time frame, the mining ore, the crafting tools, the sawing down the wood, the treating of the wood, the shaping of the wood, constructing a large watertight vessel, harvesting food and water, storing food and water, regardless of other alternative ideas, would require a lot more people and a much larger civilization and resources than just one family would have access to. Does that sound reasonable to you? It's clear that this journey involved an incredible feat of logistics, engineering, and survival. We delved into the immense challenges of food and water storage, the creation of suitable barrels, and the monumental task of constructing a seaworthy vessel with the resources available. Considering the context and the details, it's evident that the practicalities of such an endeavor, that is, building a ship, gathering and preserving supplies, and undertaking an ocean voyage, are formidable. The scope of resources and expertise required would have been vast, far beyond what a single family might reasonably manage. Ultimately, the complexities and scale of this project suggest that a miracle was necessary to accomplish it as described. Thank you for joining us through this exploration. Your engagement and insights have been invaluable. We look forward to diving into more intriguing discussions in future episodes. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on our latest content. Until next time, remember, no unhallowed hand can stop this podcast from progressing.
The Lord commanded Nephi to go and build a boat. Nephi's older brothers believed it would not float. Laughing and mocking, they said he should not try. Nephi was courageous. This was his reply.
Well, I'm not going to do it.